Hello, hello, and welcome to the Original Origins podcast, hosted by A Family Tree, a private adoption agency located in Honolulu, Hawaii. My name is Shayla Nichols, and I am a licensed social worker at A Family Tree. I'm also the daughter of a transnational adoptee. Thanks for tuning into our podcast, where I interview members of the adoption community about their stories. The reason this podcast is called Original Origins is because every adoption story is unique. And although as practitioners we sometimes generalize adoption experiences, we also recognize that no two stories are the same. Thanks so much and enjoy this episode. Today I am interviewing a special guest. It's actually our first guest on the Original Origins podcast. My guest today is Brenna Holmes-Mumford. I have had the pleasure of getting to know Brenna over the last few months. She's been interning with us here at A Family Tree. She's getting her Master of Social Work from the University of Hawaii at Manoa, in um, the Master of Social Work program at the UH Thompson School of Social Work and Public Health. So today is actually her birthday. So we'll wish her a happy birthday. And um, yeah, I'm really excited to sit down with her and I'll let her tell you more about her story.
First things first, happy birthday.
Thank you.
I know that we've talked before about my dad, right, and how he was adopted from Korea, and his birthday was kind of just arbitrarily assigned to him. And then later, um, when I accessed his adoption records, I found out that uh, they ran like a test of some kind and found out that his birthday was probably 4 months after the birthday that was assigned to him. How do you generally feel about your birthday? And as you've gotten older, has your relationship with your birthday changed?
I've pretty much always felt the same about my birthday. It's just my birthday, but I am aware that it was randomly assigned to me and it's probably not accurate. The day that I was actually birthed, so that's kind of weird. And how people talk about like zodiac signs, and I'm technically an Aries, but I could be a Taurus. My mom thinks that I was probably born later in May, so I mean, all those things are just symbolic and up for interpretation. So you can be whatever you want and whatever you identify with. But it is kind of weird to think that the day I celebrate my birthday is probably not the day I was actually born.
I see. And did you guys celebrate Gotcha Day growing up?
Yeah, my Gotcha Day is in December, so we would always get Chinese food. It was American Chinese food, but it was a day that we'd celebrate.
Nice. So you said that, so that being said, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your adoption story?
Sure. So my mom and dad worked with a private adoption agency in Massachusetts, and they traveled to China with 13 other families. Most of them were couples, some were single moms. And so that was in 1996. They brought me home. That was kind of a big deal. It was in the news and like the local newspapers. American family brings home Chinese baby. It was cool and a new thing, I guess, for people to see and be aware of something that was kind of growing in popularity. The 13 families, we actually all stayed in touch throughout our childhood, and we would have yearly reunions. Some of my best friends are from that group, so it's cool that I've known and had friends since I was born. That's kind of a connection that I'm able to have with my roots, which I don't know much about. And as you grow up, you kind of grow apart naturally and you become closer with others. So that happened, but we consider each other family, and some of the moms are, I call my aunt, and yeah, so I think that is a big part of my adoption story as well.
Okay, cool. And you have a brother, right?
Yeah, my brother, he's 3 years younger than me, and he was adopted from South Korea. My mom traveled to Korea by herself to get him, and I stayed at home with my dad. I was 3 years old.
Okay. Do you remember when he came home?
Not really, but my mom does tell me stories about my reaction to having a younger brother. Um, she said that I already decided before he even got there that I was not going to let him play with my toys. And one of her favorite stories is that I guess I wrote on a bureau with some crayons, and she asked me who did it, and I said my brother, and my brother wasn't even in America, so he was already,
Taking the fall.
yeah, he was already being taken advantage of.
That's so funny. Um, so do you feel like an older sibling? Like, do you identify with older sibling character traits?
I would say yes, probably. It's interesting to think about if I have any biological siblings and where I fall in that birth order. But as far as like my family now, he would probably describe me as an older sister, probably controlling.
Mm. I'm an older sister too, so. Um, have you ever traveled back to your birth country?
No, I would love to though.
And are you interested in connecting to your birth family?
Yes, very much so. It's a lifelong dream of mine. It's not that it's a missing piece of my identity like some adoptees feel. I don't have any negativity towards my birth family, but it's more just interest, and I'd like to know things like if I have similar personality traits, or if I look like them, or what did I inherit from my father, my mother. Also interest in like siblings and see, what things we share.
Yeah. Um, so reconnecting with your birth family is kind of just a developing part of your story actively.
I would say that I got into it and did some research about the process in college, and then I learned about it and how the percentages of adoptees that look specifically in China are not very successful. It's a very low percentage. And so that kind of discouraged me, and I think I've shied away from it a bit, because it's something that I so badly want, and if I was not successful, it would just be, I just don't know how I would be able to handle it. So it's always something on my mind, but it's not something I'm like currently really pursuing.
I see. So you're kind of protecting yourself.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I think that's probably a good way to describe it.
Okay. Have you ever done 23andMe or anything?
Yeah, so my DNA, I've done it on 23andMe and Ancestry. So I know the genetic breakdown of where I'm from. It says I'm 99% East Asian, and the sites can give a specific region of China um, that you're most likely from, and where that DNA, originated, and it actually aligns with where I was. So,
Is it a big region? Like, are there a lot of people?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not entirely sure, but I'd say yeah, it's probably. I mean, all of China's pretty highly populated. I'm sure there are regions that are more or less, but yeah, I think it's probably a big population.
Have you connected to any DNA relatives?
No, unfortunately, that is something that happens, and I have heard of that being a way that adoptees connect and find relatives. It hasn't happened with me, unfortunately, but I was able to download my DNA from Ancestry, and I guess, I don't know, like the raw data or whatever, you can upload it to different sites. So I uploaded it to a Chinese database. But yeah, I haven't been notified of any matches on any sites, unfortunately.
Yeah, I did it too. And I only had like fourth or fifth cousins, and I reached out to some of them and asked them if they knew about any like history of our family or anything, and it wasn't very fruitful. But
Yeah.
I was talking to someone recently who was adopted from Vietnam, and they were saying that there's a database that people who live on the continent of Asia generally use more because 23andMe and Ancestry are obviously American-based companies. So I think it's called Asia Family General, but he's actually going to be my next guest, so I can ask him more about that.
Ooh, that's exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Chinese database I used was called WeGene.
Mm,
Um, yeah, so we'll see if anything ever comes of that.
okay. I know too that like Korean adoptees can bring their DNA to the Korean consulate or um yeah, consulate in their area, and then they'll send the DNA to Korea, and then if anybody in Korea inquires and submits their DNA and there's a match, they'll let you know. But only the adoptee themselves can do it. So like I couldn't do it on behalf of my dad or anything. But there's just so many crazy technology advances that make it
That's really
possible.
cool. Yeah. It's nice that the government is willing to, um, I guess, be aware of the fact that they had adoptions, whereas the country of China is a little bit more quiet about the topic. Yeah.
So in what ways do you feel like your adoption has impacted your identity?
That's a good question and kind of a tricky topic. But I would say that because I look like I belong to an Asian community physically, people would assume that I am like fully Asian, like speak, eat, read, dress, family, everything like that. But I don't feel like that because I was raised in a Caucasian American family. So I don't really identify with how I physically look, but at the same time, I don't fully fit in or identify 100% with like the American Caucasian culture because that's not how I look. So it's really it can be confusing and sometimes it can lead to an identity crisis. But I think living in Hawaii has been a cool experience because of the large Asian population here. It's not uncommon to see Asian people, everywhere, every day walking around. Whereas in Massachusetts, people would look at me a little bit longer or harder just because I stood out, So here it feels more normal.
Yeah. So physically, you feel like you fit in here.
Right.
Culturally, do you feel like you fit in here? You've been here a little less than a year.
Yeah. So, like, 8 or 9 months. Culturally, maybe not either because the East Coast culture has some pretty big differences from Hawaiian culture and way of life and lifestyle and stuff like that. So I'm getting used to it.
Yeah, I resonate with that a lot. I mean, I'm from the East Coast too. And yeah, it's a pretty big dichotomy. But so you feel like you identify a lot with New England culture?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, it's
a
very specific subgroup of the population.
Yeah, if you saw me in Massachusetts, you'd probably not think anything of it, but maybe some of the behaviors or traits or language stands out there. But
yeah, I have cousins that grew up right outside of Boston. You remind me of them sometimes. How do you feel like your adoption has impacted your view of the world?
I think that it's taught me that you can't assume just by looking at a family that they're family. It's made me aware that children may not look like their parents. And so I think that brings a lot of diversity to the world, and that's something to be celebrated. It can be a tricky topic sometimes, though. It depends on, the country you're adopted from or if you were in the foster care system. But overall, I think it's made me a pretty wholesome person, and my view of the world is pretty well-rounded because of it. It's just made me more culturally aware, and like I said, you can't assume that somebody's family or not family just based on how they look.
Okay, so what's something you would want other adoptees to know based on your experience?
I would tell them, or I would want them to know that they don't have to be ashamed of where they come from. They can be proud, and they can celebrate how they got here, where their roots are, how they got to where they are now. I know some adoptees have trouble with their adoption and their story, and the fact that they were left, or some people use the term abandoned. But I think that that's all part of our journey and our story, and it's okay. And it's something that can be worked through, and it can be a self exploration, I guess. But personally, I think it's something that can be celebrated, and you can feel proud about.
Nice. So you're pursuing your Master of Social Work at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. What made you decide to pursue your MSW? Because you don't have your BSW, right?
Right, yeah, my bachelor's is in psychology, and I loved psychology, but I kind of moved to social work because I'm a little bit more interested in like social justice. I also think psychology and social work go hand in hand in many ways, and I'm excited to pursue social work. I think there's a lot of job opportunities, different populations, and communities out there to support and help. Personally, I decided to pursue the field because I've had experience with mental health issues and family with mental health challenges. So social work really addresses the people, the person, and the systems around them. And so I think that's really an amazing thing, and something that I think is really important to the world.
Yeah, like the way that systemic issues impact individual people.
Yeah, we're learning a lot about systemic issues and the system, and how different theories and techniques can apply to different topics and different micro, meso, macro levels. So it's very interesting, and I feel like it's made me like a social justice advocate.
What's like an area of social justice advocacy that you like? What's your main area of focus?
I think early childhood is really important, and supporting parents to break cycles, have really safe and healthy and positive environments for children, because they are the ones that grow up and either do really well or not so well, and that is largely attributed to the experiences they had as a child and experiences that their parents did or did not provide. So I'd say I really advocate for early childhood education. Mental health, I think, is also really important, especially these days. We're seeing it more and more, how vital it is, and it needs to be more of a priority in our society.
So is today your last day at
Yes.
FT? Oh, that's so sad.
I know. It's been great, and I've learned a lot and had a lot of great experiences and learning opportunities. So yeah, today's my last day.
Wow, it goes by so fast.
I know.
What's something that you've learned about adoption since working here?
Something I've learned is the process that adoptive parents have to go through. It's a lot of paperwork, time, resources to adopt a child. And that's made me think about how these families are oftentimes adopting because they are unable to conceive naturally. And then you think about families that are fertile and have no problem getting pregnant and they can just have a baby whenever they want and they don't have to pass all these background checks or home checks or write about their life to a stranger to get a child. They can just do it and they don't have to get approved. Um, so no matter, it's I think it's a lot of work that adoptive parents have to go through and it takes a lot of time. But it shows their resilience and their passion for adoption and all that adoption can offer a family.
Yeah, I think about that a lot when I'm doing the home studies for our adoptive families because a lot of times they're still carrying that like grief and loss of if they do have experiences of infertility, sometimes they're still grieving, and then on top of that, we're making them, they're just under severe scrutiny while we do their home study process. So I always have a lot of empathy for families who maybe are, struggling with grief and loss and also having to go through this process. Which is obviously it's a lot different now than it was in the 90s, but has it changed your perspective on what your own adoptive parents went through?
Sometimes I ask my mom when I learn things about what adoptive parents have to go through here. I ask her, like, oh, did you do this? Or what was that like? Or did you have to do a home study or interviews or give every single detail about your life to a social worker? What was the process like? So yeah, I definitely think it's given me an appreciation for what my parents have gone through.
They did have to do a home study?
Yeah, they did.
Did you read it?
No, I actually don't know if
They probably
my
don't
mom
have it
has
anymore.
it. Yeah.
Okay, what's something that you want people who are considering adoption to know?
I think there's a lot of stuff out there right now about whether you should or should not adopt a child of a different race or ethnicity. And that's a really heavy subject, and it can be a big conversation in today's society. It is complicated, but I would say for parents that are considering adoption and they have this question of should I adopt a child of a different race or not? Would it be in the child's best interest or not? Do whatever you think is best and do whatever you can. Yeah, there might be some benefits or negatives of adopting a child that is your own race, but as long as you have an open heart and mind, that's what the child's going to feel, and that's ultimately what matters.
And you were transracially adopted?
Yes. I'm Chinese and my mom and dad are white.
Okay. Have you seen the trailer for this new movie that's coming out? It's about a girl who was transnationally adopted from China, and her friends go. It's a comedy, but they go on this journey to revisit China.
I haven't heard of that, but it sounds really cool.
Yeah, I don't know it's called Joyride. I don't know when it comes out. It might be out already, but do you think you would see it?
I think I would, just because I'm interested in China and the experience of other Chinese adoptees. I feel like it might stir up some heavy emotions within myself, just because that's an experience I really want to have in my life. So I think it could be emotional and it could maybe lead to some jealous feelings. Because like I said, it's something that I want really bad too. But I would see it just so I could, become more informed and learn more about others.
Mm. What's a movie, book, or TV show, any media really, that you feel represents your own experience, if there is even one?
There's two movies that I've seen that come to mind. One is called Somewhere Between. It probably came out about 10 years ago now.
It's a movie.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And so it follows 4 or 5 Chinese adoptees who were looking for their birth families. Some were successful, some were not. And it was just really powerful. The second one is called One Child Nation, and it's a documentary about the one child policy in the 80s and 90s in China. It interviews many different people. So it's set in China and done in China, and it interviews parents who were forced to give up their child, or some, or in some extreme cases, end the life of their child while they were pregnant. It also interviews some of the city officials who had to enforce those rules. So if they found a woman that had a child and they weren't allowed to, they would have to take extreme measures and sometimes take the mom and force an abortion, or take the kid. So it's powerful and it's emotional, and it goes through the experiences and feelings of the families that had babies and had to give them up.
Yeah, I've actually seen that one. It's pretty heavy. I'll link both of those resources in the show notes so that people can watch them for themselves. But is it difficult for you to think about the fact that the reason that you might have been placed for adoption or forcibly removed from your mother's care was because of the one child policy?
Yeah, I think that's definitely the reason why I was brought to the orphanage. It's not really a difficult thing for me to think about, though, because it's not something that I remember or can connect to. Like, I don't remember being born and placed on the street, literally, and brought to the orphanage. I have no recollection of that. I do wonder sometimes if the things I experienced in the first 8 months had an impact on me and how I am today, because there are research and studies by psychologists that say how very early childhood experiences impact a person. So that's kind of interesting to think about. But obviously, I really don't know. So it doesn't bother me too much. I'm sure it bothered my birth mom and birth dad, but I don't think about it too much, probably just because it's out of sight, out of mind. But I'm sure if my birth mom explained that process, it would be very emotional.
Yeah. A lot of adoptees struggle with, as you mentioned earlier, that with the idea that they were maybe rejected or abandoned, maybe voluntarily by their birth parents. Whereas if you were adopted during the one child policy, like you said, it was most likely pretty probable that you were placed involuntarily.
Yeah, I personally don't have any negative feelings or resentment or feelings of abandonment. I feel like my birth parents did what they did, and they did what they needed to do. And luckily, I was provided with a good life. So I can't be mad at that.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your experience. You are our very first guest. We'll have to have you back when and if you ever go to China so you can share that experience with us.
I definitely would love to.
Are you doing anything? What do you do? What are your plans for the summer?
I'm actually traveling back to Massachusetts for a bit, but while I'm on the mainland, I'm going to be traveling to Europe for a few weeks. So I'm going to be pretty busy. Yeah. I'll be off the island for about 5 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you come back.
Yeah, and then I come back for a bit and then start school again.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for everything that you did for us this year, this school year. And again, thank you for being the first guest on the Original Origins podcast.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Please remember to subscribe and leave a rating or review. Follow our socials at A Family Tree. And if you have any feedback or know someone that should be featured on this podcast, please head to our website, afamilytree.org, and fill out the form on our podcast page. If you'd like to make a donation to our organization, you can do so on our website as well.